Good evening, everyone. I'm going to ask you all to please take your seats. We're ready to begin. Welcome to the Utility Safety and Environment Committee meeting for Wednesday, January 11th, 2022. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the Utilities Committee meeting minutes of December 14th. Can I get a motion, please? So moved.
Second.
It was moved by Mrs. Davis, second by Mr. Oswald. Are there any questions?
Call for the question.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The next item on our agenda is the continued discussion of the fireworks issue. Mr. Lippian, would you like to start us off since you referred this?
Through you, Madam Chair, I have nothing in particular to add since the last meeting, just that I'm glad we're able to address the issue so quickly. Thank you for moving it on a priority for the agenda today.
Thank you, Mr. Lippian. One thing I want to mention is that the committee decided last meeting we would not have any permit fees for fireworks. I'm going to defer to Mr. Brunick. Could you read, because Mrs. Deary read what Lorraine did, and I think that's probably comparable to what we're trying to do. So, Mr. Brunick, if you would read that, or would you, if you'd like me to read it, I can, whichever.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Mitchell. I can, it's a rather long ordinance. There's only one pertinent part, I believe, that, I believe that is, right. So what Lorraine did, just to summarize the general ordinance, is to further restrict, so when the state changed the law last year, they have these permitted holidays that you are allowed to set off fireworks, and on those permitted holidays, you have permitted times that you're allowed to set off the fireworks. Most of them are between 4 p.m. and 11 p.m., but there are some exceptions for like New Year's Eve. So why don't I do that? So the permitted holidays per the state are July 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and the Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays immediately preceding and following the 4th of July. Labor Day weekend, and the Saturday and Sunday immediately preceding that Monday. Diwali, I'm not sure when that falls. New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, Chinese New Year, again, I'm not sure exactly, I think that's a floating date. Cinco de Mayo, Memorial Day weekend, and Juneteenth. What Lorraine did is they took some of those holidays off of their list. They further restricted what the state allowed, and they're only permitting the Cinco de Mayo. They're taking off Memorial Day and Labor Day. They're allowing Juneteenth, Independence Day, but not the surrounding weekends. And they're allowing New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. And that is all. They have restrictions until 11 p.m. They don't indicate a start time. I think it would probably be wise to indicate a start time on ours, whether it's 4 p.m. or some other time. I think that's up to the council. But I would not want to leave it open-ended. The way I read Lorraine's, it could start at midnight that day and go all the way up until 11 p.m., 11 hours worth of fireworks. I don't know if that's what you want. Obviously, we should do it, but I don't think that's probably what most of you want. But I would follow that model, I think, is the way this is trending, is to follow Lorraine's model of looking at the state permitted list and maybe taking some of those holidays off or further restricting the hours on those holidays. But how and when you do that is up to the committee. Is that what you were looking for, Mrs. Mitchell? Summary?
Yes,
okay.
Thank you. Mr. Oswald, you have a question, sir?
Through you, Madam Chair. I guess what Lorraine's doing is acceptable to me, but I don't know what the darkness times are on the time changes. But I don't think I would start it at 4 o'clock. I would start it at maybe 6 or 7. I would assume you want to start doing these things when it gets dark. Now, right now it gets dark at, what time is it? And so around New Year's, I don't know what time it gets dark, but I would say that they've got a pretty good map out of what's doing. I think we're not going to do the permitting. About the only other thing is what was the fine?
Forgive me, let me look at that. It is a first-degree misdemeanor. And that is, forgive me, I'm not up on my criminal law. I don't know if the chief can correct me if I'm mistaken on this, but I think that's maximum fine, I believe, of $1,000, but that's rarely going to be imposed, I would think.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Brunick? Ms. Davis?
For Mr. Brooks, I just had a comment that, Lorraine is nice, but I think we need to set our own precedent. And that means we choose our own days, July 4th and New Year's and Memorial Day. And then I'm truly against the 4 o'clock. 8 o'clock is good dark. Even when we have it, the fireworks at our own self, it's like 9 o'clock by the time the fireworks start off at West Park. So 8 o'clock, no earlier. That's my opinion. No earlier than 8 p.m.
Thank you, Mrs. Davis. I concur that we don't have to do exactly what Lorraine does, that we're just using them as a blueprint as to what they did. Chief Pelko, if you don't mind, I'd ask you to step up and give us your input. Safety Service Director Lundy, forgive me, I didn't welcome you. Welcome to the First Utilities meeting.
That's okay.
Thank you for coming. Chief Pelko.
Yeah, so whatever you guys deem necessary, we'll enforce. I know we'll be going to fireworks calls anyways, so we'll respond to them just how we do everything else. If we get the complaint, we'll go to where it's at, check everything out, and if we can cite somebody, we'll cite somebody. Even if you make rules against it, people are still going to violate it.
Absolutely. Do you have to catch someone actually in the act of setting off fireworks, or can the neighbors call and say, hey, my neighbor's been setting off fireworks since 8 o'clock and it's now 2 in the morning?
We would have to catch them in the act of doing it. Now, that wouldn't stop the neighbor from videotaping them doing it, and then we could use that as evidence against them as well. But a lot of times when we go there, if they're doing it, we can at least tell them to stop. And
do they?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes they don't.
Are there any questions for Chief Pelko? Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Madam Chair, I guess what they were just saying, can you, or have you in the past said, we don't have the ordinance to set off fireworks. Could you please stop? If you don't, we're going to have to come back and give you a ticket. Have you done that kind of thing to try to be a little bit?
We've always had an ordinance where you couldn't set off fireworks. Last year was the first year where we didn't have the ordinance. Yeah, we would explain to people we got a call and complaint. Like the noise ordinances would still suffice if somebody would call and complain about the noise. So you could cite on that as well with people blowing off the fireworks.
Thank you, Chief Pelko.
Yep, you're welcome.
Are there any, Mrs. Simmons?
So I got a question. So most of the times when you're called out because of the fireworks or whatever, the person that's doing the fireworks, they generally have a scanner, so they know when you're coming and they know what to do. So how does that work?
So what we can do is if we know somebody has a scanner, we always tell the people to let the dispatchers know when they call it in, and then the dispatchers will give the call over the mobile data computer in the car. That way it's not going over the radio, so they don't know we're coming. So that's what I would suggest. The complainants let dispatch know to dispatch it over the MDT computer instead of over the radio.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to offer input? Come on up. If you'd come to the mic, please. Please state your name and address for the record.
Carol Wright, 110 William Street, Elyria.
After speaking with my councilman, I did some research. I actually called my, holy moly, don't scare me like that. Reaching over my shoulder. I called my insurance agent and asked regarding the homeowner's insurance, and I know there was a talk that maybe the other person that's setting it off, the homeowner's insurance would kick in if something were to catch on fire on my house. Keep in mind, where I live, the houses are a driveway apart. There's no room for any safe distance for these to be set off. And when I was speaking with Councilman tonight, I had mentioned, in a way, it's like when you shoot off a gun. If you shoot it in the air, you own that bullet until it comes down. Same thing with the fireworks. You own it from the, as you well said, Mr. Lippian, from the pop, you own it until it's down. If it goes on your neighbor's roof and catches their house on fire, you own it. However, as Chief said, the person has to be caught in the act to be charged. And that's the exact same thing that my insurance agent said, that it has to be able to be proven that a certain person set it off. What are the chances of that? After the house catches on fire, the person's going to be gone. So it's then I said, what happens? And he said, well, your homeowners would kick in. I said, okay, that means I have a claim on my insurance now, which I've never had, and my insurance rates go up. Not right. And so that is some of my concerns. I mean, you know, restricted time is better than nothing. However, my preference would be not at all. One other thing I had when I talked to Chief Prenesti about it, I said, you know, when somebody applies for a permit for a block party, they can't have grills within a certain distance of homes. That's more controllable than a firework once it goes off. I mean, you can shut the lid, you can grab a hose, it's low to the ground. Something's up on somebody's roof, too late.
Thank you, and I do understand that we can't ban fireworks totally because they're legal in the state of Ohio within limits, correct, Mr. Bruning?
We can opt out of the state statute and we can put a total ban on consumer fireworks. The problem there is one, I mean, this is a chicken and egg problem, unfortunately. I mean, this goes back to the way the law basically was before, where people do it anyways. The police and the fire get inundated with calls and they have no enforcement mechanism. We're trying, I think what we're attempting to do here is to regulate it in such a way that you're giving people windows that they can do this, and putting some restrictions on there and keeping it as contained as possible. Whether it's going to work in practice, I think remains to be seen. But I think that would be more questions appropriate for the chief maybe than for me as far as the enforcement mechanism goes. But, you know, the question of whether we can ban them, we can. What effect practically will that have is another layer. And I think that's basically back where we were before. They were still doing it.
Right, absolutely. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak? Thank you guys. So I have a question. So there is someone who has a big 4th of July party every year, and their family likes to shoot off fireworks, and the neighbors are cool with it. The neighbors don't mind, park in my yard. How does that work? Mr. Sierra?
Through you, Madam Chair, that would be one of the cases I was citing before about not having a permit. Typically, that type of environment is going to be done during whatever legal hours there are and over by 10 o'clock or 10:30.
True.
You know, I don't see a problem with it.
Any other comments? Mr. Lippian?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I believe earlier in the year when we addressed fireworks, we had some residents come in, some veterans. They were talking about the sorts of traumas that it reinvigorated from them, from their past military service or for their animals in the house. And I remember, I think it was Councilman Tolet said his preference is just for the 4th of July. And I think others of us had said maybe 4th of July weekend. So there might be an opportunity to create a window. It sounds like Councilwoman Davis's interest is in an 8 p.m. maybe to 11 p.m. window on whatever days we decide. But as far as a misdemeanor and as far as the fee that's charged, I do remember many residents saying they wanted to make sure the fee was sufficiently high so as to discourage as much as possible people from setting off the fireworks.
Okay, thank you. So I think what we have to do now is decide what days we'd like to allow fireworks to happen on. So, sorry. So, 4th of July, evidently. Do we want the weekend before, the weekend after? What is the committee's pleasure? Ms. Davis?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm only for the 4th of July only. You don't need no days before, no days after. The 4th of July only. That's my preference. Not commencing before 8 o'clock.
Anyone else?
I'm for that.
I'm for that.
Mr. Lippian?
Through you, Madam Chair, not being a member of the committee, I would have no objection to that. That sounds reasonable.
Mr. Tolet, you want to say something? I support that. So the 4th of July only. So if the 4th of July, let's just be honest, if the 4th of July happens on a Wednesday, we all know they're going to shoot off fireworks, you know, for the whole weekend. So we just tell the neighbors, call the police?
Call the police.
Okay,
Call the police.
all right. So what about Labor Day? I say no. Okay.
Through you, Madam Chair, Labor Day is not why. That's a different type of celebration.
Right, right. New Year's Eve? I say yes to New Year's Eve.
I say yes to New Year's Eve. And the time,
That's got to change a little bit.
yeah, I don't even think it should, through you, Madam Chair, I don't even think it should start at 4. I don't think it should start till 12 midnight, and go to 1, but that's just me.
It's all right, let's decide the dates. and
Yeah,
then
let's
come
decide
back
the
to
dates and we'll come back on the
times.
time.
Okay.
So New Year's Eve, yes,
Yes.
and New Year's Day after midnight? Because a lot of people shoot off after midnight to celebrate the holiday. I say New Year's Day after midnight. I don't know what,
And we'll set the time.
okay. What about Memorial Day? Okay. What about, Juneteenth, which is June 19th? Mr. Lipton?
Through you, Madam Chair, it being a relatively new holiday, I think it would be an opportunity to celebrate it in a new fashion. I wouldn't be opposed to Juneteenth, not being a member of the committee again, but I think that would be refreshing.
I concur. Mr. Oswald?
Well, I guess then if we're going to do Juneteenth, then we should do Cinco de Mayo, and for the Mexican people or those, and then for the Asian, doing a Chinese. So at what point then do you make sure that you have everybody incorporated and not make anybody feel bad like they're being left out? So I say you do it for one, you kind of got to do it for everyone, right?
Mr. Brunick?
Yes, maybe to put it a little more delicately, I don't want to infringe on any one or more cultural or any other impacting factors there. So I agree with Mr. Oswald. I think if you're going to do one of those holidays, you should do all of them. I think if you're going to pick apart the dates that you're going to do this on, I think you need to have a good basis on which to do that. Again, any primarily cultural related holidays, we want to be very careful about picking them.
Thank you, Mr. Brunick. So these are the days that we have agreed upon. 4th of July only, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, Juneteenth, Cinco de Mayo, and Chinese New Year's. Do we all agree?
No.
I don't agree.
I wrote down what y'all said. Okay. Where is the disagreement?
Well, I mean, when we go picking all, when is Chinese New Year?
I don't know. Because as Mr. Brunick said, Mr. Oswald, I'll get to you, as Mr. Brunick said, if we celebrate Juneteenth, then we should try to be inclusive
Yeah.
of all other cultures as well.
Right.
Hold on. Mr. Oswald?
I guess what I was saying is we don't have fireworks on those three, June 19th or Juneteenth and those three. We don't have fireworks.
I'm gonna disagree. I think we should have fireworks on those days. And that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. Mr. Lippian?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you. I think Juneteenth to me is distinguished from Cinco de Mayo and Chinese New Year insofar as Juneteenth celebrates the formal ending of slavery in America, which is a tremendous holiday and something worthy of celebrating. And Chinese New Year and Cinco de Mayo seem to be more culturally oriented holidays. They aren't celebrating necessarily a legal action or a landmark decision that resulted in the liberty of many formerly disenfranchised people. So I guess I would kind of draw a distinction between Juneteenth and Cinco de Mayo and Chinese New Year on the other side.
I hear you. But I think we have to be inclusive if we're gonna celebrate one cultural, and Juneteenth is a cultural holiday. If we're gonna do that, then in my opinion, we need to be inclusive. That's just my opinion. But it is the committee's pleasure. So if you guys don't want, Cinco de Mayo, Chinese New Year, say so, but I strongly disagree with you. Mr. Oswald?
I guess, through you, Madam Chair, we could put it through a vote, but I think it's all or nothing. You can't just pick out one. And, Mr. Lippian, I don't know the full history of why the Chinese have their celebration or the Mexicans have their celebration, but it is a cultural thing for them, just like the Juneteenth would be also. So there is background on why they have Cinco de Mayo and why they have the Chinese New Year celebration. I just don't know that answer.
Mr. Brunick?
I think this illustrates exactly why we need to pick an all or nothing approach.
Mr. Corzine?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I usually don't weigh in on these things, but as a member of the city's new formed Diversity, Inclusive, and Equity Committee, I think that including all those would be appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Corzine.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Corbin?
Through you, Madam Chair, I certainly agree with Mr. Oswald that we're going to pick X number, and sure enough, somewhere in the coming months, somebody's going to come and they're going to want the Tet, which is the Vietnam. You know, I agree that the three that we had picked out, which pertain to our national history, the 4th of July, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, I would like to think that the majority celebrate these 3 days, but I'm concerned that if we don't include Tet, if you don't include Cinco de Mayo, if you don't include the Chinese New Year, and the list just goes on and on. What about St. Patrick's Day? I mean, the list could go on and on and on. I think if we limit the number and maybe revisit it, but limit the number in the first reading, July 4, 12/31, 1/1. if we've limited it, and see how it works out for the coming 2023. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Corbin. Mr. Brunette?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with the sentiment Mr. Corbin has laid before you. I would say the distinction, though, is that what we're looking at is a list that's been promulgated already by the state law. I'm a little bit less apprehensive about piggybacking with the state law and then further cherry picking from there, provided our further cherry picking isn't coming across as being discriminatory. But if the state hasn't chosen those holidays, and if they're willing to fight any battles or claims that may come up from that, I feel more comfortable piggybacking on those defenses than I would trying to mount new ones to dates that we've picked arbitrarily, that anyone may look at us and come up with a discriminatory purpose for, even if that wasn't our intent. That's just the way I would like to look at it.
Mr. Lippian?
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you. While I respect the opinions of everybody on council, we can have philosophical differences, I suppose, about the difference between a cultural holiday, something that takes place in America and is related to American history, is the distinction I was drawing to make Juneteenth. It's a different beast in that regard. But I would say I wouldn't be opposed to those holidays being added, but I would be preferentially oriented toward what members of my ward like Ms. Cheryl Wright and others have said, which is as limited as possible. I know Councilman Tollett's preference was just the 4th of July. I mean, I think the 4th of July and New Year's Eve, to me, seems like what my preference would be, based on conversations with multiple residents from my ward. Because, and to continue, our ward has got really, and much of Elyria has postage stamp-sized houses really close together. 150 feet, I'm told, is the preference for setting off fireworks to guarantee you're not going to have much ordnance fall on people's roofs, but we can't really achieve that in the first ward. So the preference for many of the residents in my ward is as limited as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Lippian. Ms. Simmons, did you have your hand up?
Chair, I agree. We should stick with 4th of July, New Year's Eve, and New Year's, because like I said, if you're gonna pick, we're gonna have 19 different, reasons for people to set off fireworks, and it's just gonna make it hard. So if we just do the basics, like we said, the first year, we can go from there.
Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Madam Chair, could we, and here again, it's a preference of this organization right here, but anyhow, if we didn't have those other three, could they, how hard would it be to come back if they really were passionate about it and petitioned to get that back? Is that a difficult thing?
No, that wouldn't be hard. We'd already have the framework in place. We would just be amending the dates on which we're permitting them.
And so I guess what I'm saying is right now the idea was to start limiting some of this because of our veterans and some of the people that have issues, the dangers. And then, we can go and see if anybody does shoot them off on them other dates or whatever. But yeah, we could sit here for another hour trying to figure out what the best thing is.
Sure. We're not going to, but we could. So if I am hearing the committee, and if you all want to put this to a vote, that's fine with me. If I am hearing the committee correctly, we desire the 4th of July only, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm seeing nods in the affirmative.
Correct, Madam
Okay.
Chair, from me.
So can you put that on the ordinance? 4th of July only, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. Now we need to discuss time.
Okay.
I say no earlier than 8 p.m. for the 4th of July, but what do you guys want? Mr. Lippian? Well, let me let my committee go first. I'm so sorry. Ms. Davis?
Through you, Madam Chair, we know that the time changes, and so if you don't move it toward 8 o'clock, it just starts to get dark at 9 in July. So at 8 o'clock is early. I feel that 8 o'clock is early enough to start and no later than 11 p.m. on that day.
I'm good with that.
I'm good with that. Mr. Lippian?
I would concur with that. I'd be interested to know what civil twilight hour is on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. That dictates when the sun would set and roughly when a good time would be to get the fireworks in a time window for that time period. Do you know what civil twilight hour is on those times? Maybe the law
Your
director can.
opinion? Do we have to set a time, or can we say twilight hours? I think a time is more definite, because, I could look outside and say, oh, it's twilight now.
He's not gonna wanna hear this, but I'd defer to the chief on that, because that's gonna be more an enforcement issue. I'd like to be as unambiguous as possible.
I think we would prefer a time, because that's something definite, like you said, twilight, what time is dawn and dusk, and twilight, a time would be great for us.
Okay, thank you, Chief Falco. Okay, Ms. Simmons, did I see your hand up? Okay, Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Madam Chair, I guess for New Year's Eve day, I would say no earlier than 11 o'clock start them. And then on New Year's Day, which would be 1 a.m. So it would give you 2 hours to shoot, an hour before and then an hour into the New Year day.
And what about New Year's Eve? What time did we say for New Year's Eve?
11 o'clock p.m.
Does the committee concur?
I concur.
So let me read you what I have.
We're all coming over to your house.
I have the 4th of July only, starting at 8 o'clock p.m. to 11 o'clock p.m. New Year's Eve, starting at 11 o'clock p.m. to 1 o'clock a.m., is that right?
On the next day, yes.
And New Year's Day, 11 o'clock p.m. to 1 o'clock a.m. Does the committee concur? Mr. Sarah?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think the point they were trying to make was New Year's as a whole, starting on New Year's Eve at 11 p.m., into New Year's Day at 1 a.m., and that was it.
It's done. Yeah, only 2 hours.
That's right.
Okay, so New Year's Eve, okay.
And through you, Madam Chair, it's going to be just like a speeding law. You go 35 miles per hour and somebody does 40. So you know you're going to start it at one time. They're going to always tweak it just a little bit if we expand it too much, you know. So I think that's a good limit right there.
Thank you. If you'll bear with us just one moment, and I'll read the committee report. This is a great conversation, and I thank you all. Excuse me. And as Mr. Brunick said, as this goes on and we find out how it's working, or we feel the need to add days, we can always come back and amend the ordinance. So we have considered the matter of proposed legislation to limit fireworks within the city. And this is an ordinance authorizing the said proposed legislation to allow fireworks on the following dates and times. 4th of July, 8 o'clock p.m. to 11 o'clock p.m. New Year's Eve and New Year's Day from 11 o'clock p.m. New Year's Eve to 1 o'clock a.m. New Year's Day. Can I get a motion, please?
So move, Madam Chair.
Second.
It was moved by Mrs. Davis, second by Mrs. Simmons. Are there any other questions?
Call for the question.
Mr. Lithia?
Through you, Madam Chair, pardon me, I was just wondering if we determined what the fee would and how we would classify it, whether it's a misdemeanor or if that's going to be a separate vote.
So that's a good question. That is already covered in the state law, and we are sticking with the state law, which indicates that it's a first-degree misdemeanor, so it's up to $1,000.
Thank you, Mr. Lithia and Mr. Brunick. Call for the question?
Call for the question.
Question's been called. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you again for your input. Thank you so much. And we're going to move on. The next item on the agenda is the matter of the continued discussion, oh, never mind, we just did that one. The matter of bidding out and entering into a contract for LOR-CR-658/Cleveland Street Improvement Project, Engineer McKillop. Before she begins, let me just say, we've covered this on Monday nights. Unless you all have questions for Ms. McKillis, we're gonna keep it moving. Did you want to add anything, say anything?
I don't need to.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mrs. McKillop? If not, I'll read the committee report. Oh. We have considered the matter of advertising for bids and entering into a contract for the Cleveland Street Reconstruction Project, resurfacing and road diet, Hawthorne to Golf. And this is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and to enter into a contract for said project. Let me just remind you, this was approved by Finance Committee on Monday night. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
It was moved by Mr. Oswald, second by Mrs. Simmons. Are there any other questions?
Question.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The next item on the agenda is the matter of guardrail upgrades for Route 113, Lake Avenue and Lorraine Boulevard through ODOT. This is, as was discussed in finance, this is an ODOT project. It is not gonna cost the city a penny. So, any other questions regarding this? Except for my lights being fixed. Can I get I apologize, let me read the legislation. We have considered the matter of an agreement with ODOT to perform guardrail upgrades on State Route 113 in the areas of Lorraine Boulevard and Lake Avenue. And this is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with ODOT for said guardrail upgrades. Can I get a motion, please?
So move.
Second.
It was moved by Mrs. Davis, second by Mr. Oswald. Are there any other questions?
Call for the question.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The next item on the agenda is the matter of a 5-year lease agreement for the acquisition of a new CCTV truck. Superintendent Corzine.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Again, as discussed the other night, this is just to lease a new CCTV truck for the sewer crew to replace one that is being retired from its 5-year lease.
Thank you, Mr. Corzine. Are there any questions for Ms. Davis?
Through you, Madam Chair, I just want to clarify something when you said the other day. Now, how much is gonna cost? Is this a monthly, or do you pay this amount yearly?
Through you, Madam Chair, these are annual payments.
Just annual payments?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? If not, I'll read the committee report. We have considered the matter of a 5-year lease agreement for a new CCTV truck and equipment for the WWPC sewer crew. And this is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into said lease. Monies have been appropriated in the 2023 temporary budget. Emergency clause requested. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Simmons, second by Mr. Oswald. Are there any other questions?
Question.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The next item on the agenda is the matter of a purchase of a new HVAC system for the WWPC admin building. Superintendent Corzine.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Again, as discussed the other night, this is to replace a 35-plus-year-old non-functioning HVAC system for the wastewater admin building. Emergency clause required due to long lead time.
Thank you, Mr. Corzine. Are there any questions for Mr. Corzine? Seeing none, I'll read the committee report. We have considered the matter of a new HVAC unit for the wastewater plant administration building, and this is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids for said project. Monies are appropriated in the 2023 temporary budget. Emergency clause is requested due to long lead times. Can I get a motion, please?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Davis, second by Mrs. Simmons. Any other questions?
Question.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The next item on the agenda is the matter of the purchase of an F-350 4x4 extended cab pickup truck for the WWPC plant. Mr. Superintendent Corzine.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. This is to replace an older vehicle, 2011 F-350 for our catch basin and manhole repair crew.
Thank you, Mr. President. Are there any questions? Ms. Davis?
Through you, Madam Chair. So this F-350, is that a Ford?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Just want to keep it in there.
You got a Ford retiree here, that's why she's asking.
Just want to keep it in there. Thank you, Mr. Corzine.
They're all Fords.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'll read the committee report. We have considered the matter of the purchase of a new Ford F-350 4x4 extended cab pickup truck with dump body, toolboxes, and plow for the WWPCP catch basin repair crew. And this is an ordinance authorizing the purchase of the said truck. Monies are appropriated in the 2023 temporary budget. Emergency clause is requested due to the long lead time. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Oswald, second by Mrs. Simmons. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The next item on the agenda is the matter of the purchase of a new Ford F-550 service truck with toolbox and pump and motor hoist for the WWPC plant. Superintendent Corzine, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, this is a purchase of the Ford F-550 service truck for the lift station crew. The hoist will allow them to safely lift and lower the heavy motors and pumps through the hatchways.
Thank you, Mr. Corzine. Are there any questions for Mr. Corzine? Seeing none, I'll read the committee report. We have considered the matter of a new Ford F-550 service truck with toolboxes and pump and motor hoist for WWPCP lift station maintenance crews. And this is an ordinance authorizing the purchase of said vehicle. Monies are appropriated in the 2023 budget. Emergency clause is requested due to long lead times. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Davis, second by Mrs. Simmons.
Question.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is the matter of the purchase of a new Case 580 SN backhoe for the WWPC plant. Mr. Corzine.
Thank you. To you, Madam Chair. This is to replace our existing 2005 Case backhoe that will be retired from service. We are getting a $26,000 trade-in on the old one. This was originally in our 2024 outlay, but we have to move it into this year. Otherwise, we won't get it in time before the other one is retired.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Corzine?
Call for the question.
No, I have to read the committee report. I'm sorry.
sorry.
My mind went blank. We have considered the matter of the purchase of a new Case 580 SN backhoe for the WWPCP, and this is an ordinance authorizing the purchase of said equipment. Monies are appropriated in the 2023 temporary budget. Emergency clause is requested due to long lead time. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The next item on the agenda is the matter of the purchase of operating chemicals for the WWPC plant for 2023 through 2024. Superintendent Corzine, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is something that we do every year. We always go out for bids for chemicals for the wastewater plant. I'm wondering if I could please add an emergency clause to give us time to get the bid documents together and get the wording approved through the law director's office.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Madam Chair, just maybe real quick, do we usually use about the same chemicals amount-wise every year, or does it vary a little bit?
It varies. We try to economize our use of chemicals at the plant, and so it does vary. Sometimes situations will arise at the plant where we might need to use a little bit more to keep the plant in balance, but we keep our eye on that very close.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Davis?
Through you, Madam Chair. And do we have to have a yearly contract? There's no 2-year or 3 years, so the price kind of like stay the same for like a couple of years, or, because I see you battling for 1 year.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, that's a great question, and there's a good reason for it. These are commodities, and the prices do fluctuate. If we get a year, like Sam has this year for chlorine, where the price is very high, we want to go out the next year and bid again. But all these are commodities, and fortunately, most of our chemicals stayed pretty much the same last year, and we're hoping the same this year. But you never know when the prices might go lower, and for the amounts that we use, we can save a lot of money.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corzine. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I will read. There is a list of the chemicals. I couldn't pronounce them if I tried, so if you want to read them, they're on the committee report. We have considered the matter of the purchase of operating chemicals for the wastewater pollution control plant for years 2023 through 2024. And this is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase of said chemicals. Excuse me. Excuse me. The current contract expires April 15th, 2023. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mrs. Simmons, second by Mr.
Terry,
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr.
Excuse me, could we get the emergency clause added?
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Motion and second concur?
Yes.
Yes, concur.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Corzine. So we were called for the question, is that correct? So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corzine. The next item on the agenda is the matter of entering into the second and third year option with Republic Services for hauling of sludge from the Lyria pumping plant. Mr. Jacobs?
Through you, Madam Chair, we discussed this Monday night. This is for hauling the sludge generated at the water plant to BFI's facility in Oberlin. We'd like to exercise the second and third year of options. They were the only bidder the last 2 times we bid it out.
Thank you. Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Madam Chair. You said for the driving, getting it there, do we dump it for free? How much sludge do we have to pay for the sludge that we're giving them?
We're paying next year, or this year, will be $86.38 a ton is what they charge us. That's the total cost of using their dumpsters, the fuel charge, and they pick it up and take it and bring the empty dumpsters back to the plant.
Okay, so it's just not the hauling part. It's
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Corbin?
Through you, Madam Chair. Did on Monday, did you say that they were the only bidder?
Yes, sir. We bid it out, 2 different 3-year periods, and they were the only bidder.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Jacobs? Seeing none, I will read the committee report. We have considered excuse me. We have considered the matter of sludge disposal contract with Lorain County Landfill, and this is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a second year and a third year option of said contract. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Davis, second by Mrs. Simmons.
Question.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The last item on our agenda is the matter of the purchase of operating chemicals for the water pumping plant for 2023-2024. Mr. Jacobs?
Not to repeat what Terry said, but this is a yearly thing we do. Chemical prices are rising. The water plant last year used $550,000 worth of chemicals. 4 months were at the lower price, 8 months were at the higher price. So we have the price increase built into the budget this year.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Jacobs? Seeing none, I'll read the committee report. We have considered the matter of the purchase of operating chemicals for the water pumping plant for years 2023 through 2024, and this is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase of said chemicals. This is an annual bid. Mr. Jacobs, do you need this as an emergency? Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. So there will be an emergency clause on this as well. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Oswald, second by Mrs. Davis. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. There is no other business to come before the Utilities Committee. I thank you all for your patience and your participation in the fireworks discussion. I think we're off to a very good start, so I thank you all for that. Have a good evening. Oh, wait, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. We have fun here.